Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 192. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the last podcast of May 2022. And I just want to apologize right off the bat, real quick. If you hear any extra noise or more noise than normal on this episode, I'm going to say it right now. I am recording this podcast a lot later than I usually do. Typically, I try and record the podcasts early-ish in the morning. That's when, the road and outside where I record is a lot quieter. But yeah, things have been a bit all over the place in terms of my life and actually finding the time to do this podcast. I'm actually recording it really, really late in terms of, when I usually record. So I apologize if it does sound busy or if it's too much noise in the background. I'm really sorry about that. But as I already said before, yeah, my week or my last 2 weeks have been a bit hectic to some extent. I am kind of getting to the last leg of work at the moment to some extent, as in I'm going to be off of work soon, which I am desperately looking forward to. And a lot of family and personal matters have come up, which have taken up a lot of my time because, as we all know, family comes first. But I'm not going to sound like a broken record too much on this episode. I hope I don't, based on what we have to talk about on this episode. So I'm just going to get straight into things. I haven't watched or done anything. I am still currently playing a game at the moment, but it's quite a big game. And who knows when I'm going to be talking about it because, well, to kind of hint at it, yeah, there's a lot of things to do before you actually beat the game. There's a lot of optional stuff and a lot of things you can do. It is one of those games where you can beat the game very easily. You can rush through it if you know what you're doing, but I want to beat and do everything to some extent. And I intend to be as powerful as I can before I take on the final boss. But yeah, that's all I've really been doing, and even then I've barely found the time to even play that. But, enough complaining about my life. Let's actually talk about some stuff that came out, or is going to come out more accurately. And yeah, we've got a pretty crazy, interesting, all over the place episode this time around. Yeah, the trailers were definitely in full swing, definitely a lot of announcements, definitely just a ton of things that I guess you can be excited about, although I am going to talk about these things to some extent and, my likes and dislikes, because I think it is a bit of a mixed bag to some extent. But yeah, enough teasing. Let's get to the main one, the biggest one, potentially one of the biggest films to be released this year, and also one of the, in my opinion, potentially one of the biggest failures that could release this year. I am, of course, talking about Avatar, The Way of Water. I'm not sure why it's called The Way of the Waters, but, whatever. Avatar 2. The original one came out in 2009, 13 years ago, technically to some extent. Over a decade in the making to some extent. And one of the main, I guess, plans and aims with this film, with James Cameron, was to essentially film all the sequels back to back, which is why this film's taken so long to make, because his plan is, after this film comes out next year, the next one will come out, and the year after that, the next one, and the year after that. I think there's meant to be 5 sequels to some extent, but who knows, things might change. The world is in a very unpredictable place right now. But honestly, I was pretty intrigued to see this trailer, and at the same time, I wasn't surprised because this year has been just bizarre, to say the least. 2022 is going to go down in history as maybe one of the most controversial, disastrous, and strange years in recent history for a myriad of reasons. But yeah, the fact that this film even exists is one of them. There's a few other things I'm still waiting to happen this year because they might as well, given just how batshit crazy the world is right now. But yeah, honestly, this film is 13 years too late, in my opinion. And I personally am not interested in this film anymore. I have no connection and no attachment to this franchise. I did see this film way back when it first came out. I did actually see it. I saw it in 3D. And honestly, I thought it was boring. Even as a young child, I did not care for it. I saw it in 3D and it gave me a headache. And I honestly won't be watching this film, but I am interested to see how it's going to perform critically and financially. Because if I've learned anything when it comes to films, especially in the last few decades, and even in more recent times, as long as you have a crowd-pleasing gimmick, your film will be successful, but quickly forgotten about. which is what we are currently seeing with a lot of films right now, mainly more in the Disney Plus side of things, where a lot of their shows and films that are exclusive on Disney Plus are talked about, buzzed about, and then completely forgotten about. Everyone just forgets about it because it's locked behind a paywall that lots of people don't really care that much for. But looking at the film to some extent, the whole time while I was watching this trailer, I was thinking to myself, this looks like a video game cutscene. It honestly looked like Horizon Zero Dawn in its like bland as hell sequel. There's nothing really special about the visuals to an extent in this film. And I will give the film this one bit of credit. The natural lighting actually looks really good in this. It looks pretty realistic. I'm not sure if it is actual realistic lighting or it's done within their animation CGI engine, but it's impressive in places. I will give the film that. But the characters are still kind of creepy in my opinion. They've always been creepy. I think they're meant to be like 10 feet tall or something like that compared to a human or whatever. And, they're elongated, like, anatomy. But it is strange that they've been working on these films for like over a decade and they still couldn't combat the whole uncanny valley effect. Like, I know some people it's not going to bother them, and I'm sure to some extent their intentions with this film isn't to be super realistic, I guess, because obviously this is, giant blue cat people. You can't, it's hard to believe that. But still, I do find it bizarre. And to some extent, going, slightly more deeper into this film, I would argue that we don't need another film pushing, graphical boundaries, and we don't need another style of a substance Hollywood blockbuster, and we don't even really need another Avatar film, especially if you're not going to do anything original with this one. Obviously, this is a teaser trailer. They're not showing you anything, but this looks exactly like the first film. I bet you can't even distinguish the difference between the two. If I were to literally cut a few clips from both of these, films or trailers, however you want to put it, you probably wouldn't be able to tell, which is a shame to some extent, because the film industry is in a pretty bad position right now, and this is not going to save it. I say that more in the grand scheme of, it being creative or taking risks to some extent. Yes, there have been financial and critical successes like The Batman and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and other smaller successes like The Bad Guys, which I'm really happy was successful. But what the industry needs is more creativity and more experimentation. There is nothing fresh or interesting in this trailer. And it just comes across as a bunch of random scenes and decent looking environments. There isn't really anything that's really pushing boundaries, in my opinion. Sure, it could, subvert my expectations and be the opposite of the first film and actually just be a genuinely good, well-written and well-acted, performed story to some extent. That could very well happen, and if that's the case, can't complain. I'm not one of those kinds of people who wants to see failure. I'm one of those kinds of people who wants to see originality and originality succeed. And what I'm getting here and what I'm seeing isn't anything particularly, special or interesting, besides from just, some pretty visuals, which if that's what you want, fine, you'll love this film. But if you want more than that, I don't think you're going to get it from here. I wouldn't say this trailer is disappointing. I'd simply say I just don't care at the end of the day. Sorry if that upsets people, but it's my opinion at the end of the day. Next trailer, this is another really quick one because I'm really struggling to, I guess, form an opinion on this trailer to some extent. And it was another one that came out of nowhere. I've been a bit out of touch with films for the most part, mainly because, the filming or film industry is just getting so generic. There's very few films that I actually care about, and even then, as I'm sure you guys know, it's more or less an animated film. But let's talk about 3,000 Years of Longing, which I guess is the new George Miller film, who obviously in recent years did Mad Max Fury Road. He's also done a lot of other films which he gets no real credit for, like Happy Feet and Babe, Pig in the City. I believe he also did the very underrated sequel. If you've never seen the sequel to Babe, Pig in the City, the sequel is just batshit insane, and I would highly recommend it. But yeah, no, he's a master when it comes to filmmaking and, the actual art of constructing story. And yeah, he's just one of those like unsung like classic directors that I feel doesn't really get the recognition he deserves, especially, like I said, when you go back and look at all the films he's done, prior Mad Max. And visually, this film is bizarre and it's really in your face. And I don't know what to say. Like, it's too much to some extent. Like, it looks nice. And there are some interesting, once again, visuals. But I'm really not sure how these all play into everything. And, it's just a bit confusing. I mean, I appreciate the fact that the trailer doesn't tell you anything about the film. But at the same time, it's just chaotic for the sake of being chaotic, and maybe that's because whoever edited this trailer is coming off the pretense of, oh, he made Fury Road, he's a crazy man, his film's going to be just as crazy as this, and, that might not be the case, because you're seeing so many visuals, and I'm just wondering how this is going to tie into a story regarding a woman in a very, maybe sad or awkward position who, has the opportunity of having 3 wishes from a genie. And, I do think that both Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton's performances are really strong from what we've seen in the trailer, and I love their chemistry and personality. It really shines through, and I feel like that may be another strong or great highlight to this film, because it is odd. You don't really see, I guess, relationships between, interdimensional beings like a genie and just like, a woman in her, 50s or whatever, to some extent. It is an interesting dynamic, and that concept is really interesting. It makes me want to watch this film, but there's like a bit of a disconnect between, I guess, what the film is about and what this film is like trying to shove down your throat to an extent. It's a good example of how you don't really do a trailer, because I feel like this film isn't going to be as mad as the trailer is portraying it, which is very misleading if that is the case, because, yeah, there's great stuff here, but I don't know what the context is. It is a strange one, but I did want to mention it because I think it is an interesting film. It has potential to be a pretty good film. I mean, it's got a good director, good performances, and the visuals do look great. There's a lot of CGI use, but it looks like there is a fair bit of practical, I guess, incorporation in this film, much like with some of the prosthetics and, what would you call it? Fashion designing, art department, I guess. So there is that sense to it. But yeah, really, really interested in this one. But I just, maybe I'm just struggling to get, even now I'm struggling to form the words to even talk about this. So I should just move on, because, I'm just going to end up rambling. But the next one we're going to talk about is a very divisive trailer, a very divisive series. I wasn't actually really aware of the hate this series was getting. I didn't assume that everyone was loving it or hating it, but I am surprised by it, but I can understand, and that is going to be for the long-awaited She-Hulk Attorney at Law TV series. They finally dropped the trailer. I remember literally watching this at, this is how rough my life has been. I remember watching this trailer at almost 1:30 in the morning, ready to go to bed. I don't go to bed at 1:30, by the way, but ready to go to bed and just being like, oh, I'm going to watch the She-Hulk trailer. And yeah, another one, this is really hard to talk about, because tonally it's all over the place, and I'm honestly not sure what it's trying to be, which I guess explains the negative reception this trailer has received. Granted, a lot of the hate is from fanboys wanting a superhero series and sexists complaining because woman, which is always just their argument, is just woman shouldn't be in show I like. I don't have a problem with She-Hulk. She's a character I actually really like. I really do like the whole duality or dynamic with her being like this literal strong woman in what could be considered a male-dominated profession, being, law and order, and, her having to kind of abide by the rules and the situations of the courtroom. That's always been a great dynamic, and plenty of people have done that in the comics from what I've heard and read prior to this TV series. And I must say, I'm a little disappointed that this series isn't more in line with the Deadpool series. It feels like a missed opportunity. Maybe Disney wanted to differentiate the two series because they both are in that law and order field, but another court case series would have been new and different within the Marvel Universe, because they could have incorporated a more comedic tone or something more in line with a murder mystery angle to some extent. Like maybe I forget what the word is. Maybe the through line story or the main crux of the story focuses around one court case, and you hear everyone's testimony, all the witnesses and all that, and you kind of slowly piece together the story of what happened in the court case, and maybe it intertwines with She-Hulk to some extent. Maybe she's, much like with the Daredevil series, outside of the court, she's going and interrogating these guys or doing her own investigation, realizes this is a much bigger story, but is also solving the crime to some extent. Yeah, I'm not gonna say that this trailer or this series is bad because it isn't what I wanted it to be. There's plenty of things this trailer isn't doing very well to some extent, but I feel like that would have been a great series to some extent, and I think it would have been interesting for older audiences, which is clearly what it's aimed at. It's not for children, and it really isn't for Marvel fans, which I guess is a good and bad thing, but I'll get onto that in just a second. A lot of the jokes fall flat for me, as a lot of the humor is very situational and referential. Like, making light of her new appearance and assets is just weird to some extent. Like, maybe it's because I'm not a 30-year-old woman, but it doesn't work for me in a lot of ways. Like, it just comes across as odd. Like, I get that, her friends and people would be supportive that she's gone through this transformation, and that's great, because if a friend goes through any kind of transformation, whether positive or negative, you should be supporting them and you should be talking to them. But here it just seems like, I'm mainly referencing the idea where her friend or whoever is just like, yeah, your ass looks great. And it's like, it's an odd thing to say. You don't really say that to your friend after they've gone through a clear transformation. But I think one of the biggest issues a lot of people have with this series, and partly some of my issues, is She-Hulk's appearance. And right now the CGI looks awful. I'm honestly hoping that it isn't finished or rendered yet, but it does look bad in a lot of areas. The only shot that looked great was the beginning of the trailer when it pans up and it, for that face reveal, and shows her whole body and, she just jumps down, ready for action. That shot looked great. That was actually a pretty exciting scene, like she's going to kick some ass. She's confident. That scene really worked. Other than that, her proportions are all over the place in a lot of ways. Like, her fingers are like weirdly long in comparison to everything else. Like, I understand that she's going to get taller and bigger, and obviously if you are a more physically stronger person, parts of your body are going to change. You are going to be taller, you are going to be, more muscular, skinnier, taller, fatter, whatever, in certain areas based on what you do and what you do for your body. But yeah, it just feels like they haven't quite figured out the actual anatomy of her. Like, maybe they're kind of having a bit of a fight between making her somewhat strong and manly, but obviously trying to keep the feminine side of it to some extent, because there is a clear romantic and like sexual idea behind her, which is fine. So maybe they still want to keep that, but it feels like ideas and stylistic choices are clashing, unfortunately, with this series to some extent. And like, it doesn't look like she has like superhuman strength. Like, she kind of just looks like a tall woman who's green. Like, where are her muscles? Like, I don't expect her to be showing her six-pack. I don't expect the series to constantly be showing how strong she is. And I understand that, a lot of adaptations of She-Hulk hasn't depicted her as, like, incredibly ripped, which is fine. But I feel like if you want to portray her as, like, as strong as the Hulk, or, like, strong woman, some muscular detailing would go a long way, but you don't really see it, or at least not in this trailer. Hopefully it's there. And honestly, her face doesn't animate well. Like, she kind of looks awful in a lot of respects, and I feel kind of sorry for the actress, who, be fair, I think she's doing a great job as the character. I think she's adding a very natural performance to it, but yeah, no, it doesn't look great. Overall, it's just generic and not believable, which is, the one thing you kind of need to get right with a CGI character. It's incredibly hard, and you'd think Disney would be able to do that given how well they've done it with the Hulk. But hey, maybe it's a budgetary thing, and maybe they just haven't finished the animation, hopefully. I understand that maybe this series is meant to be more of like a vehicle or a soft starting point for those who aren't really into the Marvel Universe, and that's fine. Not every Marvel product needs to be for the hardcore. And honestly, I really do hope that this series is good and that people end up enjoying it, because it's clearly for a specific audience. That's fine. I don't have an issue with this. I'm not a massive Marvel fan. I haven't watched a Marvel film since the third Avengers film and WandaVision. I honestly don't care at this point, because if it's not Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't care. But, you know, I will not let that stop me from watching a good show at the end of the day. And I think it has a lot of potential as well, is what I meant to say. It looks like it could be a fun deviation from the franchise, something that maybe exists on its own, or maybe exists in its own little universe, maybe team up or whatever. But what we're seeing is confusing, and I think that's where a lot of the negative criticism is coming from. It wants to be a superhero series while also wanting to be a relatable comedy. It's too much, and that's why people are pissed about it. It's too much of everything and not enough of one thing. No one knows what this is. And, you know, going back to the whole idea of, you know, it being Law and Order, like, I think there's maybe one or two scenes where it's actually in a courtroom, which is like, is that the climax? Are we going to get to that point? Like, why would you not show more of that in the trailer? I don't know, maybe that stuff is really boring, who knows? But it's also pretty ballsy of them to call this series Attorney at Law at the same time, when we all know the real Attorney at Law is Harvey Birdman. Like, you just took that title because it bothers me a lot. And also, just go watch Harvey Birdman as well if you've never seen that series. You know, the miserable Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers film basically ripped off that show. So go watch it, you owe it to yourself, especially if you enjoyed that piece of crap. But let's move on to our next trailer, staying with Marvel just for a little bit longer. This is going to be an odd one I'm going to talk about, because it's based on something I don't really care about, and something that also a lot of people don't like, and I completely understand, and I'm kind of with you to some extent, and that is going to be for Marvel Snap. Now, this is regarding the cinematic reveal and announcement trailer, which they just randomly dropped. Sorry for the very loud car. A lot of assholes with motorbikes do drive past here, speeding up my road. Yeah. This is an odd one. It has a fun little cinematic trailer at the beginning, and then you kind of get into the developers kind of talking about what this game is about, and it's honestly quite exciting to some extent. I mean, this is how you sell a game, and I've got to give respect the what I meant to say is, you've got to respect the passion and the energy in this announcement trailer. And on a quick note, Ben Bode, I think that's how you spell his name, Borde, because I know there's a few ways you can say and spell that. The director of Hearthstone and his studio are the ones making this game, so that's a plus, especially if you like Hearthstone or just like his work to some extent. And I'm not into card games, or more accurately, video game card games, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that. I've always been more of a collector when it comes to like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! When the physical cards were first released back in the day. Yeah, I'm that old that I was around when the first Pokemon cards came out, but I'm not going to tell you my age. The level of love that has seemingly been put into this game looks wonderful in so many ways. Like, the fact that they've cut the fat from other card games, allowing you to just continuously play with no waiting, is great. And if that's truly the case, then this is a game changer in a lot of regards, as it feels like they took a long, hard look at like their competitors and other games and said, how do we improve this? Which is always how you go about making a game in a genre that has tough competition in a lot of regards. And the aesthetics of this game are actually really interesting. It's one of the more, I guess, pleasable things in this trailer I found, in that each card having a unique animation based on that character. The 3D effect thing, like, I don't know what you call it, I forget what they call it, that they showed off. It looks great, and as I hope to see like a lot of like classic illustrations and that kind of like get that conversion. And the fact that they said that artists will get their own like variant set of cards is an awesome idea that fits into the multiverse concept, and artists being able to like showcase their style to big audiences. a plus. It's a really good thing. I just hope that these theoretical artists are credited and paid appropriately, because I know within the comic book industry and I know within freelance work, these bigger studios tend not to give them credit and tend not to pay them. Because in the past and even more recent history, people who have done illustrations for comics, they have had their signatures removed, not been credited, and even people who do commission work, they don't get paid sometimes, or at least they are undermined by other people. So, yeah, do the right thing, Marvel. But yeah, it is interesting, this game. Now, I completely understand the negativity, because Marvel fans probably don't want this. Yes, it's a mobile game. And yeah, I'm all on board with that. I don't really care about this game. I feel that we have too many of those, especially given that we are seeing like these mobile games based on other properties. And I'm not sure why. I mean, maybe it's because it's easier to nickel and dime a person via a mobile game if it's based on a well-known IP that they themselves know. Maybe that's the logic. I'm not sure. But they did say in the trailer that it's free to play, or it's, not pay to win, or something along those lines. And I really hope that's the case. It would be nice to actually see a game actually do that, because, a few have said that and then, that's not been true. I mean, there's no real need for this game to cost anyone anything. I mean, this game has enough money and funding from Disney for Disney themselves to not ask for anything in return. This is basically advertising for your franchise, so you shouldn't really be asking your fans for extra money when, it's a glorified advertisement. I'm going to say it. That's what some other people are going to say, but yeah, that's what it is. But that's not to say that advertising can't be creative or interesting, which I guess it is in that sense. It's not the most original, but, hopefully a lot of effort and time has been put into actually making something that some other people will enjoy. But yeah, that's going to be my little Marvel section, I guess you could say. Kind of sticking with crossovers and other kind of creative things, and more or less staying with games to some extent. We have the trailer for Multiverse, which is essentially Disney's Super Smash Bros. Like game. They finally released this just kind of out of nowhere. I don't know if it was announced earlier, but, here it is. And, yeah, it's just a reveal trailer for the most part that I'm going to be talking about on this podcast. And, yeah, it's a beautifully animated cinematic trailer, even if it makes no sense to some extent, because the main concept is all these characters that Warner Brothers / DC, that Warner Brothers as a conglomerate or, mass media empire owns, just kind of coming together to fight a la, Super Smash Bros. It's fine. If you want a cool ripoff, fine. I don't think they would argue against that. So many people have tried it and very few have succeeded, but we'll see how this one goes. Like, the thing that did confuse me about this trailer was, like, why did Batman throws his Batarang at Bugs Bunny, like, because he thought he was going to pull out a weapon, which turned out to be a carrot. Like, Batman doesn't know who these characters are, and I get that Bugs looks like a monster compared to the other humans he's seen, but Batman is calm and collected. He would never jump to conclusions and just resort to violence like that. Like, he would at least try and hear people out, or at least see what this threat was going to do to some extent. And yeah, that's the one thing that rubbed me the wrong way to some extent. I was like, I don't know, maybe this is like, DC is very protective of Batman, and they're very protective of Batman, but they also don't know anything about Batman at the same time. I'm talking more about the higher ups at the studio. They've certainly done their research, as we see, Warner Brothers acknowledge the Ultra Instinct Shaggy meme, for the second time, which is nice. If you're wondering why I say second, because they have referenced this before, they are well aware of the meme, which I think is fine. It's even better knowing that his like godlike powers have been like implemented and added into like the game and his moves. References like that go a long way when done right, and it feels great, and it justifies him being in the game to some extent. And it also makes perfect sense for like Harley Quinn to be drawn to like Taz, the Tasmanian Devil from Looney Tunes. I mean, she does have like two spotted hyenas as pets, Bud and Lou, And in more recent comics, I can't remember who exactly did that run, but it's the, I guess, let's say mid 2010s run. I can't remember it is, but I have like the whole collection. She has a strong passion for like helping animals, and someone working on this game knows this, and thank you for including that fact into the game, because once again that goes a long way in making that moment really nice as she lovingly like embraces Taz, which is quite nice. I like that scene. It's quite fitting for Harley Quinn as a character, and I'm actually surprised to see Arya Spark in this game. I think that's how you say her name. When I saw this trailer for the first time, I was like, is this a new character? Like, I've never heard of this character or even seen them. Are they from a new cartoon? And that's because I haven't read or watched Game of Thrones. So, yeah, it's interesting to see a animated version of her, which is cool. I don't know if she's the most popular character. I don't know if Game of Thrones fans are pissed that she's in it. I don't know. But and kind of going back to how she looks in the designs, I do like the designs. They do have that weird kind of cubey look, but I think they translate well. They could work as toys or stylistic toys to some extent. Also, I give this game a lot of respect for actually adding in their own character. Rendog or Rendog. Rendog? Yeah, Rendog. I think that's how you say his name. They're really cute. They're really cute design, and I hope they kind of play into the game's like concept and story to some extent. The game is in like closed alpha, so take what I say with a grain of salt in regard to the game, because the game is clearly not finished, and I understand that improvements will and hopefully be made, but at the moment the game is really sluggish. Like, the animations are really smooth and like very well animated, but the animations themselves are really slow. It looks like they're underwater to an extent. It's also really floaty. I'm not sure if I would like that, and I haven't played the game, so we'll see how that does play into things. Although, how do I put this? Yeah, although I'm not a massive fan of like the voice acting, as it's clear that they weren't able to get some and not others. How should I phrase this? It's obvious that they weren't able to get certain voice actors to reprise or play the roles that they currently are playing as some of these characters for understandable reasons. I mean, Bugs and, Jake the dog are really off. Like, I don't know who's doing their voice, but that does not sound like them. While Harley, Batman, and Garnet sound on point. I'm not sure if it is Batman's original voice actor. I can't remember his name. It's not Bruce Timm, because I know he did the Batman animated series, but the guy who voiced Batman in the Bruce Timm animated series, it does sound a lot like him. I get a feeling that Garnet, I think that is probably Estelle. It sounds a lot like Estelle. She has a very interesting cadence, so I don't see anyone else being able to pull off Garnet's voice that well. So yeah, the voice acting is kind of rough, but at least it has voice acting compared to the Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl game, which is out at the moment. And that actually brings me to, I guess, the future of this game to some extent. I'm actually really interested to see what the future holds for this game. It needs a lot more updates and a bigger roster, because right now it's pretty piss poor. But overall, it looks really fun, and competition is always a good thing. I can't wait to see how this game does against, once again, Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl. I'm honestly, debating doing a comparison video between the two games once support ends for them, because it is interesting that we have like these two, franchises, two giants, Nickelodeon and Warner Brothers kind of going at it to some extent. It's interesting. Although I know Nickelodeon isn't owned by Warner Bros. I think it's owned by the rival partner that Warner Brothers is a part of, if I remember correctly. That must be the case, because why would you have two games with just Nickelodeon characters and then have one where you have everything you own? That's stupid. I'm just thinking to myself right now. And we are on to the final trailer, and that is going to be for Zenless Zone Zero, which is a game that came out of nowhere, coming from the developers of Genshin Impact. And damn, this is a flashy as hell game, like almost too flashy to an extent. The editing was fast-paced. It was so fast-paced that it was a little hard to tell what I was looking at or even see like the animations. And, this game has everything, as far as I can tell, in terms of well-designed characters. I mean, you've got cute anime girls, you've got furries, you've got nekomatas, you've got onis, you've got your small, adorable mascot, and a huge bear with a cannon. Or whatever he's holding. I'm not sure what weapon he has, but he looks cool as fuck. All I'm going to say. The animations are fantastic in this game. Like, their movement sequence are really fluid, as this game like reminds me a lot of like Arc Systems, like Guilty Gear games. They've got like that kind of cel shady, 2D meets 3D kind of style, when they kind of have like the same pacing in terms of like speed and flow for the most part. Like, this game's presentation is beautiful, and clearly a lot of talented people have been working on this game. Hopefully, like, the gameplay and overall game lives up to or complements, the stylish character designs and smooth animations, which I am hoping for. Like, even checking out the website, which I'll put in the description and download link. Even the website is like very stylistic. It's very like flashy, very professional looking. Like, they've clearly got a strong vision with this game. And although it is the developers of Genshin Impact, it does have me a little bit worried about the future of this game. I'm not a fan of how Genshin Impact operates its like content, or even its whole inception of it basically being a mobile game in disguise, just put on consoles. That is incredibly problematic when you think about where gaming is going, when you've got all these other, possible things that could be happening with the gaming industry, such as them implementing advertisements and every studio getting bought up. It is a bit worrying to some extent, but yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting when you think about these kinds of things. But then again, hopefully we'll get something good out of this game. Hopefully it actually will be a pretty good hack and slasher beat 'em up game that isn't like, like I said, a mobile game in disguise to some extent. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast for the most part. Yeah, it was quite a busy one to some extent, and I'm actually surprised I managed to get it done, because yeah, it was pretty big. But yeah, we got the video of the episode, which I'm sure everyone has seen this, and everyone kind of should see it, and that is going to be for Kendrick Lamar, and that is going to be The Heart Part 5. I think that's what the song is called. I haven't actually put it in my notes for some reason. I just didn't write it down. I don't know why, but that is going to be the video of the episode. If I've said the name of the song wrong, I'm sorry. I know that sounds kind of professional, but yeah, it's going to be the new Kendrick Lamar song. Really interesting song, really interesting music video. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but yeah, definitely go check that out. Go listen to his album, which is already out. He just released that album out of nowhere, because I remember reading that it was meant to release in June, but I guess it's out. Haven't listened to it because I've been busy, and also because it's a double album, but we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening to this podcast. I'm sorry if I sound a bit rushed, a bit panicky, a bit off. It's just I am running out of time, and I really need to get this podcast done. So hopefully this podcast has been enjoyable. And yeah, I will once again end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.